All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started.
What?
Maybe we'll probably have a couple of stragglers coming in, which is great. Seems like it always happens every year with this presentation. So, but we will get started. I'll go ahead and introduce our presenters for this afternoon. Barley, hops, and yeast. Oh my. Let me introduce to you Dr. Brad Sturgeon and Dr. Steve Merman. They're going to share a little bit more about the brewery De Novo Beverage of Monmouth, LLC. A little bit about Brad. Brad attended Illinois State University, received both his BS and MS in chemistry in 1987 and 89, respectively, and then went on to receive his PhD from the University of California, Davis in 1994. Brad joined the faculty in 2007 and is currently an associate professor of chemistry with a focus on physical chemistry. Partner, Dr. Steve Merman, graduated from Monmouth College in 1980 and went on to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, where he received his DDS in 1985. Steve has owned and operated his own clinic here in Monmouth for over 28 years? Yes. Going on 30? 30, yeah, for 30 years now. So the guys will share how the science and business connection that began with the Monmouth Coffee Project in 2010 has evolved to the brewery partnership. So I think I've introduced them every time that they've done this presentation. I think the folks in alumni know my taste in beer. So I can attest that the beer is definitely worth it, and the presentation is as well. Got it?
All right. Well, it's kind of rare that I get to serve beer during class, but not to say that I haven't done so. That's a whole other story. But, hey, you want to talk about the business just a little bit and how we started?
Well,
I just throw it over to him. If there was a bus here, right?
you know, we both were home brewers, and you know, I grew up at a time, as you did, where the only beer that was available was light yellow, and they all basically tasted the same. And when I graduated from Monmouth, my dad was on sabbatical in Austria. And so we traveled around a little bit, and I was introduced to beer that didn't taste like Budweiser. And so when I came back, you couldn't buy anything that didn't taste like Budweiser, basically, especially in Monmouth. So home brewing was had just become legal, and so I started brewing in my basement with another Monmouth College grad down in Roseville, and I don't drink a whole lot, but when I do, I want a beer that I can taste, and because I don't brew a whole lot, because I don't drink a whole lot, and I wasn't able to brew a whole lot, but I sure enjoyed it. And then one day, some guy was sitting in my chair because he had busted off his front teeth.
Look how nice they are now.
And we got to chit-chatting about brewing. He said he enjoyed brewing, and I said I did too. And you said that you had always had a dream of opening a brewery, and I said that's crazy.
And I think when I came back and sat down next time, you said, yeah, actually that would be a good idea to open a brewery. And I said, you're crazy. Right?
Yeah.
So it must have been the third visit.
Yeah, and by the time we got him some front teeth, it seemed like something that was worth looking into, and this is what came of it.
Yeah. Well, that's a good introduction. And again, we have a short time with you, so we want to get to the beer as fast as we can. But actually, this beer here, which is called Big Red Ale, which is one of our flagship beers. Actually, my friend over here is Big Red, by the way. This has nothing to do with the college, by the way. I don't know why people think that. But this is actually the exact same recipe that Steve started brewing 30 plus years ago. And he would brew it once, maybe twice on a big year. And would drink this almost exclusively his entire life.
Yeah.
And so we have incorporated it into our line of beers, or what we call our flagship beers. So, look, so we've done this many times, come and talk to a variety of different kinds of people, and as an educator, it's always a challenge for me to do similar things, and so I decided to just totally change it up, but you don't know that. Some of you might know that, because I think I know some of you have seen it here. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put on my official name badge, which is my BJCP judge badge. And what I want to do is I want to start off with a simulation of judging a beer. Now, this would get kicked out of a brewery competition because it has a label hiding underneath here. You're not supposed to have a label on there, but what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to use a rubber band and put your judge label on your beer, and then you send it in to them. It's very strict. Like, it's not the proper tension in the rubber band. They go, right? So, I mean, it's really kind of crazy the way they do that. But when they do that, they'll remove this label, and then they'll assign it a particular number. So actually, look on your tables in front of you, and there's a couple other sheets here for that back row that maybe need at least one back there. You see where it says the score, or it says the entry number. I should look at mine with my glasses on, right? So the entry number. So if you were going to judge this beer, which I'm going to give you guys one to judge here in just a minute. What you would do as a judge, you would write your name down, and I'm Judge B0512. I'd write my contact email on there because I usually get emails after competitions, and they'll go like, thanks, or they say the opposite of thanks. But it means that when you judge and evaluate, you try to be constructive in the way you make statements of how you perceive the product that was given to you and placed in front of you. So I usually just get thank you things. I don't usually get too many negative things, although there are some running jokes. Notice that you have a certain ranking within the beer judge certification program, and I won't tell you about my 3-hour exam. I had to do that, and I wrote 10 pages of handwritten things. And every half hour they threw a beer at me in order to. So that adds a whole new dimension to the way you take a test. But I am a recognized beer judge. I'm not certified. I'm certainly not a Grand Master. But I've been doing this for quite a while. So this beer that you're going to be sampling today is from category 15A. So notice in front of you, among pairs of you, there is a beer judge certification program guide. This one right here for the gentleman in the back there. If you look in that guide, open up that first page, and actually the first page 2, 3, and 4 will tell you all the different styles of beers that exist. So I think we're up to 34 different categories of beers, and you'll see within those categories that you have different styles. So what I want you to do is focus on the Irish category 15. You see in category 15 there are 3 different substyles of Irish, and the beer that you're going to sample and judge today is the 15A, the Irish Red Ale. Okay? Now, it's hard being a judge because you got to do a lot of sampling and things. And
I'll volunteer.
yeah.
Don't let him fool you. I'm a beer judge too, but I only have 2 things. Either I like it or I don't. And it's important when you choose a business partner to find somebody who
Sorry, and I'm keeping you away from the beer, I understand this, but that's a really important point because, in reality, when I teach my class, I don't like every student in my class, okay? But that does not mean that they get a grade based on whether I like them or not. Now, I may not like them because they never turn in their work. Well, I just ask them to turn their work, and they're not doing that. Whether I like it or not is not up to me, right? So actually, beer judging is kind of interesting because, again, if you flip to the last pages of this handout, you'll notice that I've given you the style guideline for category 15A. Actually, it's for all the category 15. And as a judge, you probably should have read over this and know generally about history, what kind of character exists in this beer. Because if I'm going to judge your beer, I should be somewhat of an expert on that. So again, you can take these sheets home. I have some extra ones up here if there's two that need one. But there's a lot of stuff in there. Remember, there's 34 categories, and there's usually 3 to 5 different subcategories within each of these groups. And I think we have maybe like 7 categories that we're going to sample. It's going to come really fast, so you're going to have to hit it back. So let me draw your attention to this beer score sheet quickly. And notice that here, Steve and Libby and Michael, yeah, just put a bottle like this on the table. And yeah, so just do this.
Oh, Bob, go back.
I'm curious to see how many of them have it. Yeah, you go.
Oh, no, then you get your whole body.
So notice on the score sheet, again, I'm not going to make you write this stuff out, but it takes me about maybe 10 minutes to score a beer, right? And I write down, this whole page is full of notes and small writing. But the first thing that you need to do is you need to inspect the bottle, right? And so that makes it a little bit harder that we've opened the bottles for you. But you have to make sure that the cap's on right, that the fill level's right. There's not some sort of like Band-Aid floating in the bottle. Now there are some, you're going to have to share it around as we go there, yeah. There are some beers that actually have an off flavor that tastes like a Band-Aid. And on occasion, I do look at the bottle and go,
Any questions?
okay, nothing in there. But so what I'll ask you to do is just to take your glass, your bottle, and pour yourself, about an inch or so in the bottom of your glass, and pass that one around. And actually, if you're not a beer drinker, I would encourage you to pour a glass so that you can experience it without drinking. Because in drinking the alcohol, that's actually not what you're doing. What you want to do right now is you want to put your nose in it and just smell it for a little while. Again, you want to do that in the glass of beer. So don't drink it just yet, just keep smelling it, right? So you're trying to figure out, what is this? If you had done your homework, which I didn't assign you, okay, so I'm not mad at you. If you had done your homework, you would have read over the style guidelines. And for the aroma, you'll see in the style guidelines it has a description of the aroma. So the aroma is going to give you some sort of malty character. And how you describe that is kind of tricky. So, hey, if you guys are passing out glasses and stuff, there's a bunch of glasses on the front of the table if anybody else needs a sample. So we should have enough to sample around. So. Hey, hey, open me one, Steve. Come on. I gotta know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to
hey, so notice what I'm always doing is I don't like these glasses. There's too much nucleation. You see that keep bubbling? Man, I clean these glasses too.
Yeah, it's not going to affect
The ones you're wearing or the one you're holding?
Oh, maybe that's it.
How do you clean your glasses?
So if you notice in the bar when they pour you a beer, they always get it wet first.
Yeah.
And so that actually wets the surface. So in this case, I'm wetting it with the beer. So I don't really have a specific way of doing it. I just use the standard dishwasher. But I haven't used these glasses. I bought these glasses for you guys.
They're very nice glasses.
Because I needed some glasses if I ever do this again. So, but notice a couple things about it. You have a head on the beer, and that head is kind of an off brown, kind of a tan color. the color of the head will be different depending on the style of beer. And I know Bill's over here going, yes, let's get to the wheat beer. So the wheat beer always has this very bright white head on it, right? And there's a certain thing they call head retention. You see this beer has very good head retention. It still has a head after a certain bit of time. If somebody pours you a beer in the bar and it comes out and it has a little head on there, and then you look over at it 2 minutes later and there's no head on it, there's probably something wrong with that beer. Or the glass is dirty, or something like that. So, hey, actually, do this with me. If you cover this up and try not to be too messy and swirl it, and once you swirl it, then what I want you to do is just sneak your nose, don't take your hand off, just sneak your nose in the side. Okay? So, yeah, so you get different characters in this. And you do want to do the aroma at the beginning and at the end. So as a judge, I have a style that I will write down my initial conversation or my initial thoughts about the aroma. And then at the very end, before I'm done, I will smell it again because it has different aromas as it progresses over time. So, so the second one on here is appearance. Again, this one has a red sort of copper tone to it. Again, I'm going a little fast here because I got too much to say.
How come some of ours are cloudy compared to yours? Yours is really brown and ours are cloudy.
In the same bottle, we got clear.
Yeah, so depending on how, we don't filter our beers at all. So if you got one of the first pours, then some sediment might have collected at the bottom. So as you pour it a second time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So some sediment might have, and actually that's like a vitamin shot, right? So look, we could go through this whole thing here, but appearance. Notice there's some. You should take this with you when you're standing in line somewhere. You should pull it out of your pocket. But flavor, and again, pull the other sheet out of your pocket and figure out what kind of flavor. This is supposed to have a malty flavor. There could be a buttery component to it, and you get all this kind of fancy language, which is actually a lot more complex than the wine world. If we have any serious wine sommeliers in here, I will give you the flavor charts for beer, and there's 34 times about 3 or 4, so there's well over 100. I think there's 130 different styles, and they all present very differently. Mouthfeel is an interesting one. Actually, when you swallow it, there's like either a slickness or a smoothness on the finish. And actually that comes, this one has a little bit of a dry finish from the hops. If it doesn't have much hops in there, it's much more slick. And so you look for that in the beer, and you make comments about things like that, right? Overall impression is where you can give your personal opinion whether you like it or not.
That's the only part that matters.
Yeah. But
Summary, it's beer.
I've learned to not make that judgment because what you usually do is you say it either adheres to the style or it does not adhere to the style. So again, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but you're implying that if it doesn't adhere to the style, then it doesn't adhere to the style, right? It doesn't make it bad, it just is not what you told me it was. So, and it's really difficult when you have a table of judges and they're like, this is one of the most awesome beers I've ever had, but it's dark black and it's in the pale ale category. And you're like, no, this is an awesome Schwartz beer, but it is not a pale ale, and it'll get a score in the 20s out of 50 total. It's not going to win the competition. If you don't know what you're giving me, then there's a problem. So that's the end of the simulation. Just drink up, right?
How come there aren't more red beers?
Actually, so the red beer category might be considered kind of like a hybrid. It's not a traditional, and again, there's a lot of beers that are kind of red in color, but they don't really call them red ales. But the recipe that you use to make like this, I mean, Steve has a special ingredient on this one that,
Food coloring?
Do we wanna know what it is?
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about beer is whether it's this beer or Budweiser or a Guinness, anybody know Guinness? You know, black can be, it's all made out of the same stuff. It's all the same seed, just how they're treated. And
Yeah.
there are some of the barley, there's a way of roasting the barley that produces a nice red color, and that's a portion.
You see how fast
A lot
these
of
people,
places don't carry
these awesome helpers.
it.
Oh, look at that, they had to set them out there. Actually, so when Steve was talking about that, I've got 8 of them. So, yeah, before you go, I have some.
We were here for the, Bob was.
Hey, so this idea, like on your table has this conversation about how beer is made. Again, I
He was
think
set up in
most
the
people
corner and they
understand it's
sold
based on grain.
And then we
And
went to
maybe
the
as we
brewery
have a
on
little more
Sunday,
time,
or
we can
Sunday.
hand out some of the samples of grain. But you've got water, which makes a big difference. As a chemist, I appreciate that highly. But the grains are all different. We probably have 30 different kinds of grains in the brewery that we
Can't answer
use.
that.
This one is a lager, which has a lot of sort of other bits and pieces of information in there, but this one doesn't have much hops in it.
No,
This is Steve's
should be done
recipe.
after the red.
Generally, yeah. But this one is highly malty. Here's the thing, you have a preference of either a malty beer or a hoppy beer. And people who like hoppy beers can drink malty beers, but people who like malty beers cannot drink hoppy beers. And so people have a real aversion to hops. So this one has very little hops in it. Again, you'll find that I like to do this quite a bit. Actually, there's almost like a herby aroma that comes off of it. I've gotten used to just saying what's on my mind, and actually, right as I did it, I got a little cinnamon. But I don't know where or why cinnamon would show up in there. Actually, notice this mouthfeel from the previous, the Big Red Ale, is a little different.
Yeah.
This one doesn't have as much hops in it, and so it has that slick mouth feel to it, opposed to more of kind of the sticky mouth feel that you get. And this is a good beer, Steve.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Oh, by the way, I kegged the second keg. So there's a full keg and there's a partial keg for the bottom one. So,
The other interesting thing, lagers, there's a differentiation between lagers and ales, right? You've heard ale, and sometimes those two terms are used interchangeably, but they really aren't. They use a different species of yeast. Lagers use a yeast that's happy at 45 to 50 degrees, and ales use a yeast that's happier at 65 to 70. And so it's
You mean during the growing season or?
no, it's a fermenter. It's a fermenter. I mean, and you've heard of the term lagering, and because lager is made at such a low temperature, it takes a long time at those low temperatures for the yeast to do its
hey, so this next one that I'm handing out is one that focuses on the hops. So, oh yeah, by the way, if you don't have to drink everything. This bucket in the middle, IKEA, like 99 cents. Your cups are from IKEA too. But notice on this one, actually, if you want another glass, a clean glass, there's more glasses sitting in front. But notice that the hop, or the mouthfeel is very different on this because of the hops. This one should be much more
He said it's got hops. Yep. It does, I can smell it.
We might have to wait till it comes around over here to get to know what it is.
Are you in line for our beer?
Yeah. So actually on your table, you find that you have three kinds of hops out there. Actually, there's one that's in a flower form, but it's dried, so it doesn't quite look like a flower. And then there's two others that are pelletized, and you can sniff those things. I wouldn't suggest eating them because they're kind of aggressive. You also have a hop plant that I pulled off the brewery wall before I came here. There's no flowers on it, but these hop leaves are, related to cannabis. Yeah. Any botany people in the group?
My brother raises hops, they're huge.
Well, sorry, nobody answered and I'm still talking. But notice, if you take a hop vine and rub it this way, it slides perfectly fine, but you try to do it the other way, and there's little needles, and it's almost sticky. So they actually climb using that type of, it's actually called a vine, B-I-N-E, as opposed to a vine, because a vine uses a tendril to grab on and carry up like a bean, but these just have this. And actually, if you get it kind of further up towards the top, you feel that difference. So.
It's a vine.
They caught on to the
There you go.
And if you have two of them,
Not necessarily, it's kind of like
much drier finish on the pale ale. Are there any hop heads? Like people who really like hoppy beers?
oh, we're here.
Okay.
No, Mike, you said hot.
Well, so take some of those and drop them in your beer and swirl it around. You might want to scrap it afterwards. But yeah, you just dry hop your beer. So.
Nice dry hop.
Yep.
Once again, Mike, you said hot.
Oh, hops are the vitamins in it. It's the health food part. No, it's bitter. They're good hops. Yeah. Boy, I don't like sour
Can you
beer.
imagine how they
Oh, sour beer.
Huh?
Hey, so this next beer that we're gonna sample
It's fizzy water.
is a bit darker. And again, I'll encourage you, if you don't like dark beer, then
There you go,
don't
Jim.
drink it. Dump it in the bucket,
That's
okay?
for you.
But experience it.
I'll finish yours.
It has essentially the same recipe as the pale ale, but it adds a little bit of really highly roasted grains to it. So it looks pretty dark. Actually, do you guys know the Schwartz beer? Yeah, so a very traditional German beer is called the Schwartz beer. It looks like this, but it tastes like a lager. They trick you. But they didn't mean to trick you, they just made a Schwartz beer. But these have a lot more kind of darker roasted character to them.
Sometimes they put it in the oven and they roast it on like a cookie sheet.
Actually,
Do they have any dark beers in February?
They actually have a new brewery opening up
In February?
about 5 miles out of the country. They grow it there.
Actually, for those of you who are very much a stickler for details, you will notice the porter bottle has a second label on there
But they are
that says
German formula. But on their own farm,
tangerine
grown
porter. Well, this is a little bit of an older beer. It's still good, but our beers, when they age, they just change a little bit as they go. The tangerine flavor went away. This is the tangerine.
Boy, that's different
Taste
from,
the tangerine?
it's different from what we
That's a big one, dark beer. This isn't bad.
Well, he said it's like an amber.
Hey, so how many of you guys like the porter? Okay, so look, the porter is like the younger brother of the stout. So you won't like the stout if you don't like the porter. Okay, but the next beer here is a porter, or sorry, it's a stout. And this one's really stouty. It's very stout. I don't know if that's where the word came from. That's very stout.
Stealthy?
But stouts are pretty stout. Yeah, so.
The porter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I think we did. Well, that too.
Gary, what's
This is the motor oil version.
Oh, motor oil, all right.
Smell this one too. The dark roasted grains is really hefty in this one. I personally like to drink the stouts actually room temperature. I have a couple of room temperature ones over there. If anybody has any questions or wants to experience that too afterwards.
How did it go with the hop stream? Is that what you done?
I didn't taste that. I mean, I especially with the
And no, you cannot put this in your car. Okay, we've heard a lot of motor oil jokes, right? Yeah, well, that works. Yeah, I mean, it sometimes you gotta put an asterisk.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is good.
This is good too, yeah.
Yeah, black and tan. Yeah, black
This has
and
the
tan.
aftertaste.
Oh, that has just,
This is a stout. Stout.
What's out?
no, normally I don't like it as well. We have a really good pale ale at our brewery, an IPA. This turns my crank. It's just right. I'm so spoiled on it.
Well, we got something that might be
Really heavy.
save that bottle.
Every
Oh my
time.
God.
Every time.
It's weird. I don't know. I'm so glad it happened before I died.
It may kill you.
That's the other side of the coin.
Oh, he's already been there and back.
Ice water and just a little bit of an angle for the stout.
It tastes a lot better than it looks.
Favorite stout.
Again, sorry
At
I'm
our
rushing you
brewery,
along
too.
here, but we
But
have
they don't
5
always
minutes
make
to get more beer, so.
That's what they
Actually,
call it.
the,
What they do to it.
Okay. Okay, yeah, we'll have, so actually, we're gonna shift, we're gonna go outside of sort of what I did for you there. We did that red ale, we did the lager, we went to the pale ale, went to the stout, or to the porter, to the stout, and they kept getting darker. So now we're gonna kind of step off into sort of this, what we call sour land. So again, when it comes to the malty beers or the hoppy beers, you typically have a preference one way or the other. But there is a sour beer that is very much the rage, and you either like it or you don't. Okay. So again, I encourage you to try it because not all sour beers are the same. But this is what we call the tart wheat. It is an awesome lawnmower beer. So when you're like totally hot, for some reason the tartness in it is just really is just very refreshing. So yeah. So and then the next one that we'll serve after this one goes here is the raspberry tart. And actually, Steve put this one together recently, and Steve hasn't even tasted this. And so I want to see the look on his face because it's really good. It's really, really, really good. So.
Oh my gosh. I got goosebumps.
No, I just.
Did that put him over the top? 'Cause you know. And you can swirl it and dump it in there. Cause yeah, following, yeah, get a new glass.
Oh my God, this is strange.
Yeah,
Mowing the lawn, I see it, hot, sweaty.
yep.
Really foul? Yeah.
Do you sell a lot of that?
Some people love it.
I just can't imagine having a fruit flavor to a beer. That just-
So look, I don't actually sell, meaning I sell it to bars, and so I don't get to talk to my customers, so I don't really know what they do.
Just buy red beer.
Say again?
I can't go to your brewery and just buy red beer.
No, I'm a wholesaler. I manufacture. I don't have a front door. But if you come back next year, things might be different.
I'll come back for the next year.
So what do you think of the sour beer?
Kathy hasn't tried it. Kathy hasn't
There
tried
might
it.
be a gene, like your genetic profile that identify. Next time you do ancestry, it'll say, do you like sour beer? Yes or no. You go, oh, we can predict that.
I thought I was sucking that stuff.
He's trying raspberry.
No, it's the pale ale.
No, no, I'll put that.
We don't have
Would you like to retaste it?
No, no, I'm going around. Yeah. That's the one that I said. Look, you can have the rest of it. I'm gonna just finish this.
Is that the quarter there?
Oh, yeah.
That's
Raspberry wheat.
raspberry wheat.
It's good.
It looks like gross. Here you go, Jen.
I love to ask the expert.
Raspberry wheat. You have to
You
find
got questions for
Yeah.
Eric, Steve, and
Hard cider.
Yeah, a lot of the bigger breweries go through the whole process of working with fruit, but technically,
It's raspberry.
there are companies who know how to extract the essence from fruit. And they sell it to you in a little bottle. So it's not artificial, it's a condensed. Again,
You got to look at what good buy.
and it's a lot more
It's like a doctor.
Yeah, so you notice these bottles, we don't,
Ooh, that is.
we have a free bottle.
Very dairy.
Around town, they have our beer on tap.
That belongs with the
Mark
dark
Alley
wheat.
Wine has our bottles, but we've been.
Oh, but people do. There's all manner of people that think beer hot and tastes fruity.
And what Kelly drinks, the two mixed together. They're both Liney's. Liney's regular and Raz. It's blackberry or honeyberry. Liney's honey and the berry.
Maybe they
She mixes them
they
together.
might have moved it under a German.
Our daughter. Yeah. Actually, first time I ever heard of it, we drove up to her sister's house in Rice Lake.
Well, so
Her
if they're
daughter
different, they're just different
was
based
here.
on the
And
regionality.
her sister says, "Hey, watch out, okay, so you're the fruity stuff." And the daughter goes, "Wow, don't you know you have to buy the honey and the fruit and mix it together?" And she goes,
So actually,
Go back to where we started.
There's more raspberry.
"Well, left here.
That is probably style.
I didn't mind, nobody else likes it.
I thought he said 3.
I do too, very much.
When he said to hurry up, he had 3 to do in 5 minutes. I thought we were going to do 2.
I like that too. I don't know.
But I don't know. I may have lost 2.
We can put a number on it.
Happens every Wednesday.
Well, they have these, you may never.
One of my daughters has to have
Sort of a built-in bar that they have.
And you told her.
I can't figure out how to turn my phone.
Do we have to listen to Brad?
Where's your?
Okay, if I could interrupt everyone here for just a second and jump in. We are just after 2 o'clock. Does anyone have just a final question or two
Where
for
in
Brad or Steve?
Where in Monmouth are you selling your beer?
So look, we do this kind of as a hobby, but we pay for it because we have to pay federal and state taxes. We have our beers at some local bars, but I think bistros maybe
They
not.
out?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure, yeah.
Yeah, so we bottle beer for Market Alley Wines, but Steve and I made the bottling system, and it's really laborsome, and so we don't really like to bottle, but we like to put things in kegs. So
We can
again,
bring a keg home. That's not
there you go. Yeah. So I mean, we're kind of on the science end, the whole business end of things. Not so good at.
Question back here?
Chemistry majors get a discount?
I was thinking.
Biology majors know the hops, so be careful.
Yes. Yes. I think it's the best answer. I don't know. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, one more.
Where did the de novo names come from?
Yes. De novo is Latin, which means from the beginning. So again, because of our timing, we had laid out some grains over here to sample, but I mean everything, these hop pellets are essentially compressed flours. The grain is right off, the stalk of the grain and malted and goes through that process. So everything we do is from the very beginning, from the most basic realm, and so that's what de novo means. So, yep. Thanks for asking.
And also talk about the water a little.
Yes. Oh, that's a good one. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, go ahead.
Okay. Well, because I was talking to some folks over here about Pilsners. So, if you go to a certain location, like in the Czech Republic, you get a Czech Pilsner. The reason Czech Pilsners are made and are really good in Czechoslovakia is because the water has very few minerals in it. If you try to make a Pilsner in London, where you have the Burton-on-Trent, where you're getting the river water that has a lot of sulfates and a lot of other magnesium, very hard water, you will not make a very good Pilsner. So again, from this evolutionary process, we think about how things get naturally selected. Well, the Czech Republic makes a really good light beer because of the water. Now, we've been brewing beer for a very, very long time. People didn't know why it was so good. But again, in the Czech Republic, you're not getting a big hoppy IPA either, because you need the heavy salts from the water in order to bring out the character in an IPA.
Where do you get your water?
So I get my water from Monmouth.
Where does Monmouth get the water these days?
But actually, this is kind of what Steve was referring to. Is as a small brewery, what we do is we take city water, we run it through a reverse osmosis system. So we have water with nothing in it.
Oh, really?
And when we go to brew something like a lager, we have a recipe of salts that we add into the water in order to mimic the country of origin. Now, most breweries don't do that just because of scale. But again, if we're going to do an IPA, you ought to see the big bin of salts that we drop in the water because we had mag sulfate, we got calcium carbonate, calcium chloride, sodium carbonate.
Right out of the lab, right out of the lab, just bring it on over.
Yeah, so we add all this stuff in there.
Oh, now that's good.
So we mimic the water.
You play your own chemistry on your own water.
It's hard being a chemist.
Yeah.
Actually, I understand it. Once I get it, then I can't do anything else. But yeah, that is kind of a unique thing, and a lot of breweries will use the water that is in that certain region, and they try to go and do all the different styles, and so some are better than others.
Yeah, sure are.
Yeah.
Great stuff, guys. Please join me in giving them a I mentioned to Steve just a few minutes ago, I'm not sure we did the order correctly here because